The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Hello and welcome back to this episode of the CGA Tour podcast, the Calvin Glen Alexander Tour here, talking all things Oklahoma State sports. Of course, it's the summer, so we're gearing up for football. If you're listening to this right now, Big 12 Media Days just happened here. So, of course, got to bring on KC Smurthwaite here with Athletics Admin and talk a little bit about all the new NIL stuff going on here. I mean, KC, you seem like the guy following you on social media here, several platforms, as well as through Athletics Admin, that you've been referred to me. Hey, got NIL questions, got some new questions here about the house rulings coming down, type of stuff. You're the man to ask. So thanks so much for joining here today.
Well, Cal, thanks for having me. I mean, I know it's summer, and I think you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, you're coming after me. I mean, I got to pay the right people because they're referring me. I mean, that's a big order for me. I mean, I got to make sure I got to check my bank account if they're referring my name because I got to pay off a couple of folks. No, I appreciate it. Collegiate athletics is a fun, very transformational age. As I was just talking to an athletic director here at the FCS level, not 10 minutes ago, they used the reference of it as soon as they speak to a reporter, or as I speak as to you, Cal, and then the CGA Tour, as soon as it comes out, it might change. So, I mean, everything is outdated as soon as it's published.
Seems like there's so many different things changing here all the time. So I will just say with that, we're recording 1 week in advance here. So just so everyone knows, in case something changes in a week, we might be wrong, but hopefully it doesn't.
You call me a liar. You can find me on Twitter and X at KC Smurthwaite and just say you are the world's biggest liar. I will like it, and I might even reply and say you're probably right.
Well, there you go. Well, I wanted to bring you on here, of course, talk about different things, but first, just can you kind of give us an overview of the house rulings here and the NIL deals? NIL, I think most people in the college athletics world are accustomed to at least name, image, likeness. At least it's somewhat of how it works, or at least how it's supposed to. But what can you tell us here, the house ruling changes and how that'll work going forward?
Well, I think from a 30,000-foot view, it's now allowing a quote-unquote revenue sharing. I think there's a big difference between revenue and even profit or even money sharing, because most athletic departments don't make revenue. It's more of just money sharing. Big difference. But anyways, universities can now pay players directly, and that's it's roughly 20 million, and it's going up a certain percentage over the next several years. And now athletic departments have their own structures in place. They have the liberty that technically, there's some loopholes to it, not entitled to Title IX. Again, we won't go too deep into that, but athletic departments can choose how they use it, where they use it, and to what players, and they can essentially use it to entice that next generation or recruit to come play for them. Now, what a lot of folks are getting confused, and even there are news reports today that it's breaking. We're not even a week into the NIL or new era of collegiate athletics. What is different from the revenue share that came down from the House settlement is name, image, and likeness, which has been around for a couple of years. That doesn't take away name, image, and likeness opportunities, which is, Cal, if you're going down to a pizza place in Stillwater, which, by the way, I've been to Stillwater and I've had one of the best, I forgot the name of the place, but a great pizza joint in Stillwater. Loved it.
I'm going to assume it was Hideaway, but maybe not. Yeah, there we go.
Was. That's right. Okay. Hideaway. If Hideaway's coming to you, Cal, and saying, hey, you're the starting quarterback, Coach Gundy, says really high things of you. We want to make sure that, that you're part of our promotional processes. We're going to give you, $25,000. 12,500 each semester, but you got to promote us on social media and do 2 commercials a year for us, X, Y, and Z. So you have that aspect. That's name, image, and likeness. They're using your name, Cal, and to promote their own business. That is outside of the realm of revenue share. Now, the news that came out today, I think it was Ross Dellinger, maybe it was Brett McMurphy. I think both were talking about it, is that they're now finding that schools are combining the two in quote unquote offers. So back to your original question. We are in an era right now that universities can directly pay players.
Well, that's it seems like that'd be a good thing, right? I mean, that would be a good thing for it to be above board, but how does that work from the $20 million aspect? Does that mean that every single school has $20 million, but you said some schools are not? I mean, some schools, of course, are revenue generating. I mean, there's no way that, some schools are not making money, but for Oklahoma States of the world, I mean, different amount of ticket sales, et cetera. So does each school have that 20 million capped? Like Alabama can't have 20 million, no, Oklahoma State only have 15, for example?
So that's the cap. And you're kind of even alluding to a great point here. And it might even go into a future conversation is I think the cap's long, and I'll save that for later if we get to that type of a conversation. But not every school will opt in and do the full 20. I think it comes back to the question of schools have the opportunity to opt in or opt out. And they had to make that decision. That date kept getting put back. Eventually it was basically June 30th at 11:59 p.m. If they opt in, they have to play by certain rules. So there were some roster limitations. And then there was even a whole other subset of rules with roster limitations, which we won't get into. But it also capped what counted. You then all of a sudden had like a salary cap that you had to count X, Y, and Z players. You had to count how you used the money. But if you opted out, you basically could not participate in revenue sharing. You could have maximal allowable rosters versus, opting in. You then had to start a transition to where you would cap rosters. And it basically erased walk-ons, so to speak. There, again, were some roster rules that went back and forth, which delayed some processes. But you'll eventually, in the next couple of years, get to a point where there's only X amount hard cap on roster sizes. But every student athlete can, in theory, get a full ride scholarship up to that. Now, with that impacts a lot of schools with their admissions, especially these private, smaller institutions at the Division I level. This doesn't impact Oklahoma State, doesn't impact anybody at the Big 12 because a good chunk of Big 12 schools are revenue generating. Folks in some schools are opting in, but only doing $1 million or $2 million. I just interviewed actually 2 athletic directors today. Their whole athletic department budget is under 17 million. So if they, in theory, were going to opt in for the full 20 million, they would be doubling their whole expenses. So it's basically a line item. So I think it really benefits some of the big boys, the power players in schools like Oklahoma State to be able to play in this sandbox. But also I think that they have a great fan base. I mean, the Pope have great resources, and I think that they're well positioned for that next phase of collegiate athletics.
Gotcha. So do you see a big difference though between the two biggest conferences? I mean, I'm not an idiot. I know the Big 12's not one of the two biggest. No, it's the Big 10 and the SEC versus the Big 12 and the ACC. Do you see kind of differences right now and how stuff's aligning? Because we know the college football playoff level, there's going to be guarantees for SEC schools, guarantees for Big 10 schools. Seems like that's coming. Last year, of course, it definitely was prevalent. There's one Big 12 out of 12 teams and 2 ACC teams, and they had to fight for those 2. So do you see anything like that coming down the pipeline too?
Absolutely. I think the next crew phase of collegiate athletics is happening pretty silently. You're seeing tidbits of it. And I think, let me take a step back. I think the next phase is actually going to be something, and I know there's a lot of smoke and people really think the smoke has died down and it's maybe out. It's not out. I think that there's some real issues going on with the Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina. I think I know there is traction still in that realm. There is money to pay the exit fee, buyouts, you name it. It's now a little bit more black and white than it was gray even a couple weeks ago or even last year. All right. Can put that right there. And I think that puts the ACC in an extremely vulnerable situation where I think it leverages the Big 12's assets and the Big 12's. Honestly, I think Brett is one of the most creative from a business standpoint commissioners in the country. I mean, against any other commissioner. Brett is extremely well respected in the sports and entertainment landscape. He is very creative. And I think if you want a commissioner that's in this era, it's Brett. Okay. Now, back to your original question. I think that next phase of realignment is more silent than it is for kind of that FSU, Clemson, North Carolina stuff. I think it's silent in that I think eventually you're going to see a break off. I think, does the Big 12 even exist in an entity in that realm? I think so, but I can't tell you if that's the case because there is some serious money being thrown around from private equity, venture capitalists, and X, Y, and Z for this. I've sat on calls in my contracted consulting work with private equity firms that have said thrown around $50 million for access to 1 to 2 teams that were not named football or men's basketball. Okay. That's some serious cash. Now, put that into perspective when you're talking about football brands, multiple football brands that they could pluck away and start a new league. So I think that really next realignment phase is more silent right now because it's a little bit more hush hush, kind of into a gray area. But even 5-6 years ago, well, not even that. Wow, time flies. 8 or 9 years ago, when we were talking about NIL, it was kind of like, I don't know if we really are we going to get there? Well, we're there. I think we're now starting to get into that conversation of where the private equity venture capitalist money is kind of out there. We see people talking about it, but there's not a lot of information. But I can assure you, the conversations are happening. The money is real. And I know some athletic departments through other means, other campus entities are getting money right now from private equity and other venture capitalists.
So why doesn't the Big Ten and the SEC just go, hey, you know what? We're going to have a football only conference here. Why doesn't the ACC do the same thing? It seemed like to me from the Big 12 perspective here, in wrestling, OU is still in the Big 12, in wrestling when it comes down to it. So yeah, they're in the SEC, but they're in the SEC for almost every single thing. But there's affiliated teams like I think South Dakota State's part of the Big 12 here. There's not a ton of big, huge schools that have big, huge name brands that are in the Big 12 in wrestling, but a lot of the schools are really, really good that are in there in wrestling. That's why Oklahoma State's still in, et cetera. But do you see something like that shifting in the future where the Big Ten says, hey, you know what? We want Oklahoma State, but just for wrestling, for example. So it's Penn State, Iowa, Oklahoma State, maybe take Iowa State as well too, et cetera. But then they kind of look around and they're like, oh, well, the Rutgers market never materialized. We never really needed to get the whole New York. We already kind of have them in aggregate. Maybe we'll take Syracuse and, but just for football, right? Or something like that happen here in the future.
Yes and no, Cal. And one thing I'll take note of, you missed one of the big dominant dynasties of Big 12 wrestling, and that's Utah Valley University right there. I mean, whoa. Utah Valley, I know their athletic director well, Dr. Jared Sumption, great AD, and they're going in on wrestling. And that's why I have to give them a shout out because I've been on a couple of their staff meetings and they talk a lot about growing wrestling at UVU in the Big 12 and they're investing in it. And to your point, I am tying this together. I think it's an investment aspect, not so much a market aspect. I think it's more of what schools are investing in it and who do we want at that point? I'm actually working on a story right now that realignment this last go around isn't so much about markets. It's more about your brands. Because if you think about it, yeah, you have UCLA, USC. That's a big market, but Eugene, Oregon, are they even the top 75 market? Probably not. I think even, I'm drawing a blank here, but even Denver is a good market, but it's not a great market. No disrespect to the market, but even when you're talking about Big 10 and Eugene, really, or even going back for Big 12, UCF, Orlando, I think at this past time, it was very much more about brand, your Oregon brand. That checks the box versus more of the Eugene market. And even if you want to say, well, they're more of the Portland market. I don't think the Portland market is a top 25 or top 30 market driver. And if I'm wrong, I am wrong, but I'm feeling very confident, especially on the Eugene aspect, that it's not. And And the same thing even goes for Salt Lake City. I mean, Salt Lake City is considered a small market team for NBA standards. So I struggle to believe that when they're talking about Salt Lake City as a media market hub, like that's false doctrine. Like that's false doctrine of collegiate athletics. So I think it's a little bit more about the branding aspect and the investments. You know, Utah, when they came into the Big 12, a lot of the conversation was that they're going to help elevate some of the obviously in football, but also in the Olympic sports. That's something that's very prevalent with the University of Utah. So to your question of, you know, picking and choosing, I think it's going to be more about brand and investing in certain sports. But there will be potentially a day where, and it's even been floated at either Arizona or Arizona State. I think their president said something in a really random newspaper article, but only a nerd like me would read it. Was that maybe there's a day that it's completely out, athletics is completely outside of the university. It's housed on campus, obviously, and they actually license the logo and the color scheme and facilities back to the university. And they're really kind of separate. But I would also add in one other thing here, Cal, is that a lot of this comes back to with, you know, sports selection to Title IX. I mean, Title IX and housing athletics as a nonprofit entity underneath the umbrella of an institution. And that's also part of the reason why Grand Canyon kind of has they're transitioning to a nonprofit, but we'll leave that there. Go do your own homework there if you want to learn more. But I think it's a little bit of the Title IX and also a nonprofit status is why you have some of these sports that are still integrated in the university, even though they're losing millions of dollars within an athletic department.
Well, that leads me perfectly into my next question here. Do you think there will be a split just amongst college, you know, from what you know right now, between especially like football and basketball, the main revenue generating sports, where, you know, I mean, there's going to be one-offs here, like Caitlin Clark at Iowa is a little bit different, but mainly men's football, men's basketball. Is there a split here where we do see what you just laid out? Basically, the athletics is completely split. There's no longer, hey, I got a class where, yeah, I've got that one sports marketing class where some athletes are in it and they show up, you know, some days a week, but then they go to other classes some other days a week to make it work with their schedule, or they just have it all online or whatever, where it just ceases, where all of a sudden, hey, if you're coming in, you're no longer having any walk-ons on the team. So why would you necessarily have guys even really go into class? You have to.
Yeah. And once again, Cal, you have great questions. And that is another elite question in terms of what does it look like next, especially with all this money that's being thrown around. And let's call it what it is. This is a semi-professional, if not a professional league. Yeah, there's going to be a break off. I mean, in some way, shape, or form. From an academic standpoint, that's where I think it gets murky. I think there will always be a component to education. Partly because if going back to that example, if a school breaks off and then license its name, color scheme, and facilities back to the university is going to want something in return. And a good chunk of that's going to be an education. That's going to be the trade-off. Hey, we're letting you do all this, but your players have to enroll in X amount of classes. I could see that it drops to part-time students, not necessarily full-time students. And that's more of an NCAA requirement, as is having, you know, at 14 as the minimum sports to become a Division I member. I could also see that being dropped down, especially if, you know, you get to a point where you start to have to make adjustments because football and basketball schools are going to this new league. I think also the aspect of professionals, it's the old NCAA commercial. Not every athlete goes majority of athletes go professional in something other than sports. I think because of that, you will always have an academic component to sports, because then you're just setting yourself, your 90, I think it's like 98.9, let's call it 99% of your athletes up for failure. And I think the overall mission of truly 18 to 22 year olds is to prepare for true adulthood and careers. And although there would probably be a good chunk amount of students who think that they're going to go pro, I think you're also going to have a large amount of other students that go, no, I also want to make sure that I'm getting 6, 9, 12 credits paid for. And maybe that becomes part of the compensation package. hey, instead of we're going to pay you $100,000, but you don't have to take any classes, it becomes okay. Or you can take $75,000 and we're going to pay for any full-time enrollment up to 18 credits. So I think there's give and take, but I always think there will be some sort of a component tied to academic institutions.
Gotcha. All right. Well, what can some Big 12 schools do right now who are trying to win over the recruits that the SEC or the Big 10 have? I mean, in the past, Oklahoma State fans know it's been, when Gundy started 21 years ago going on, his big thing was, hey, I'm going to go down to Texas, going to go recruit the Houston guys and, go get them up and just say, hey, listen, you're going to play in the state of Texas this many times a year, no matter what, because we're going to play Texas Tech, we're going to play TCU, Baylor, et cetera. Now, Houston instead of Texas, et cetera. But like, what advantages does a school like Oklahoma State have comparatively to the SEC and Big Ten, if any?
Money.
And so how do they have but if everyone's playing on the same $20 million pot, right? Is it like playing time? Is it we can offer a 4-star more money than he would be getting at an SEC school, because SEC school goes, hey, we got a 5-star. If you want to come on over, we'll pay this much. But is there some strategy involved here where we could see some benefit?
Yeah, and I'll kind of two prongs here: money and break the rules. I mean, it's not popular. I'm just going to say it. Break the rules, because right now you are seeing it. We're in the conversations. Schools are already breaking it. The system's broken. I know this isn't popular. There's no way to track it. The College Sports Commission and NIL are already having issues, and we're not even a week into it, that schools, multiple, are offering above and beyond what they're allowed to do. They're already packaging things. Now, this is where it gets to when I say break the rules. And I say that, again, with a little asterisk here, okay? We're now calling, back when we were saying, 2018, 2016, whatever, oh, they're paying players. Well, we're now paying players. We're just now calling it something different. We're paying them, but we're also packaging it together, and we're calling it, NIL or revenue share. But what's to hold a school back from packaging it together like they already are? And really, the NCAA does not, without collective bargaining or an anti-exemption from the government, the NCAA has no judicial powers. They have zero. On paper and legally, if the NCAA comes to you, Cal, as the head basketball coach of Oklahoma State, and says, hey, we're going to investigate you, you technically can say no. Like, they can't come arrest you. Now, you might be pointing, or people listening go, well, what about the whole FBI scandal a couple of years ago? Mind you, I said FBI. That was a money wiring problem. That wasn't an NCAA thing. Now, the NCAA got involved because the FBI was involved. That's different. Now that it's legal, there are now more loopholes that you can exploit. The last week, we've seen 3 or 4 NCAA upper administrators leave. Part of that, and I have talked to some of these folks, they've been told, hey, don't investigate it. Like, we can't do anything because they're running a losing streak in the NCAA core battles. There's nothing they can really do. And coaches, athletic directors know about it. So they need to get creative with their money. They can also, with that money, if push comes to shove, they just say, great, we're gonna grab our attorney, we're gonna take it to court. It's not gonna go anywhere, especially for the next 2 or 3 years. It's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, I said money, but it's also money to say, hey, NCAA, come at us, because it's not going to go anywhere. And I hate that I'm saying this, but it's the reality that nobody's really talking about, because it's true.
We just had to let go of our head coach in tennis today because of some NCAA sanctions. So I think we're maybe the school that has to be more walking on eggshells than anyone else, it seems like. But it does seem like every school is breaking the rules for sure too. So it's a weird game to play.
So, and off of that, now let me ask you this. Now let's take it one step further. The NCAA sanctions for tennis. What were they? Dive into me. I'm not familiar with.
Yeah. So it was basically like improper contact is what it boils down to. Improper contact, and then hiding things, trying to get around that is what the summary seems to be.
Okay. So that was an institutional decision, not from the NCAA. Now, based off of that, if this, let's place that into a football realm, would that have happened with Coach Gundy?
I don't know. I would say it's probably happened. I mean, to be honest, it's probably already happened. It seems like one of those things where for example, when the NCAA sanctions were coming down against basketball because of the Lamont Evans stuff, which is
true.
Interesting you bring this up, because literally the guy I had on the last podcast is the guy, Jeffrey Carroll is the guy involved in this. And
yes.
He did not want to touch on it. He wanted to basically, that was crazy. And I remember asking him, like, and he's like, and at some point I probably will, but not today. Yeah, I mean, he's still playing basketball. He still is a professional. Grant's overseas, but he's not trying to bring anything bad while he's still out in summer recruitment trying to sign with the team. So with that being said, the NCAA made a great decision in letting the Kate Cunningham year be a year where Oklahoma State could play in the March Madness. But they had the looming sanctions overhead of a post-year ban. And, of course, the next year was one where probably weren't going to make the NCAA postseason, just kind of on paper. It seemed like a borderline. We didn't have the number one overall draft pick on our team, for sure. That's what that is. And so, of course, we got it the year after Kate left and didn't get it the year, because that's just how this all works, right? It just seems like it's a scheme. Really slap everyone on the wrist you can. But then KU has 5 level 1 sanctions. We have 1 level 1 sanction, and KU gets nothing. Yeah, it just is such a weird.
It's such a double standard. And to even go back to my point, though, it's an institutional decision, but the NCAA is a glorified. The NCAA started out as a championship and event driven entity. It evolved into this day-to-day operations compliance, which it was never really intended to be. They always kicked it back to the conference offices. It wasn't until technically TV got involved is when they really needed to kind of, I mean, for the lack of better terms, unionize to be able to get to where they needed to today. And also it helped with, SMU and the U aspect. But with that, pause. They do not have the legal aspect to be able to make some of these changes. They leave that up to the institution to make these changes. They can take away your wins. They can take away your ability to compete for championships. That they can absolutely do. But from, hey, you have to fire, coach X, Y, and Z, or, hey, we need a, SMU, you're done. You can't play football anymore. Yeah, in theory, yes, they can do that as a championship and event organization. But beyond that, it's merely the peer pressure suggestions. It's like the code of the Pirates of the Caribbean. They're more like guidelines.
Well, should the Big 12 add teams to try to get closer to kind of the number of teams of the SEC and the Big 10 have right now, kind of get closer to that 18, 20 number? Because right now there's 16 teams in the Big 12. Seems like, maybe capture more of the brand appeal, as we're saying.
Well, I mean, Big 10 has 18, SEC has 16. So Big 12's with the SEC right now. I don't necessarily think, as it stands right now, that the Big 12 needs to expand. I think where the Big 12 needs to focus on, besides feeding more mouths, because as soon as you add the 17th and 18th, unless a TV network partner that they already have says, we want you to do this because we will give you X amount more, that's the only reason why they should at this juncture. Now, going back to what I said earlier, if there's a little movement in the ACC, if they're looking across their, the shoulder going, there's a couple schools we might like to add, if the ACC, let's provide a knockout punch and really corner and position ourselves, do that. But I think right now, the best thing that the Big 12 can do is to generate the most amount of money they can to distribute to their members. And I think Brett is one of the best, if not the best, at thinking outside of the box. Beyond that, I would not look at expansion yet. Because if they can generate more revenue to distribute to their current membership, if and when the SEC or the Big Ten calls, one of the members and says, hey, well, let's chat. They don't even answer because they're already in a comfortable spot. Versus if that they start to listen, they start to get traction because they're not happy with their current distributions, and then they have to start to expand. I think they need to lift where they stand, or right, where they're sitting, lift right there. Okay. The grass is greener where you water it. Start watering even more where you are, grow the revenues. And I think everything's going to take care of itself to position yourself for that next round. Now, if nothing happens in the ACC, even though I feel like, and there will be something in the next 24 months, to position yourself to be able to attack some of those ACC schools. If nothing does happen, I know Brett is obsessed with the idea of adding UNLV, its brand. And I know I was just talking about markets don't matter, but I did use the word brand too. The brand and the rising media, sports entertainment capital of the world in Las Vegas, because everything's happening there. And I think you also have Memphis right there, prime to be picked off. But again, that's if they expand right now or nothing happens with the ACC.
Well, do you think we're going to see more? Do you ever see more schools have like just big donors just pop in here? I mean, of course, Oklahoma State, T-Bone Pickens have been, just kind of a decade later in his life. I think we have been, kind of maybe doing a little Texas Tech-ish type stuff where they've got a guy sells his oil business. He's got $5 billion. All of a sudden, however much money he wants to dump in the Texas Tech program seems like that's going to help get them a ton of football transfers. They're almost leading the nation in transfer portal and recruitment. And then, of course, You've got Bryce Underwood with Michigan. Basically, it seems like through a long string of things here, Michigan donor gets on the phone, kind of knows, and they're able to pay Bryce Underwood millions upon millions of dollars. I don't even want to speculate how much. The rumor number is close to $10 million per season for him to go play at Michigan. It's a 5-star guy. He's from Michigan, but of course he's getting offered by every other school too. So do you think we're going to see more of this go on as well?
Yes. And actually in preparation for this, I actually in a roundabout way know a couple of big time donors at Oklahoma State. And I talked to them and the overall pulse from them and also from other, I would say significant donors to other institutions. I think it comes back to, short answer, yes. I think it comes back to this question, and I'll ask you this, Cal. Would you love to own the Oklahoma City Thunder?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Why not?
So can you afford to own the Oklahoma City Thunder?
Not a chance. Yeah.
So you're seeing a lot of donors now start to view even women's tennis as an ownership aspect for their teams or for themselves, where they are all of a sudden in decision-making roles because they're funding and also, by the way, getting a tax write-off in some instances to fund these sports. So, whereas before you had, the Phil Knights and, T-Boone and all that and Underwood, you are now opening this up a lot more to others to where you're making a true direct impact into the success of some of these programs. So I think you're going to have more people step up at other institutions. You're going to see schools like High Point University, who, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are going like, okay, what are we talking about High Point here? If you're tuning in right now, High Point University, just Google it, check out their campus. They are going to explode. They're already exploding. They have a ton of money. They're going to be able to have some of their donors step up and provide some of that massive amount of money. They're going to be able to buy straightway some of these players, and they're going to become like a Gonzaga of the East Coast. You're going to have some of these random schools that pop up, but because they have X, Y, and Z donors who are stepping up, that's why. So some of these older institutions, even some private institutions that have mega donors, are all of a sudden become relevant now because they have the right alumni base. And not the right coach. Leave it there. Alumni base over the coach in some aspects.
Does this mean that some of the Harvard and Yale and et cetera we could be seeing those schools, Ivy League schools, do really good at? I mean, I don't want to say football just because that seems like that'd be crazy overnight. But basketball, for example, just fewer guys on the roster. Why not? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And now you bring up the Ivy League schools. Here's the other side of it. I'm coming over here now to say something. They also probably realize that it's not the greatest return on an investment. The Ivy League guys, okay, hold on. So I'm going to go get like a 1-year success rate here. So there's two sides of it, but to somebody who was like, yeah, I want to do that and, get joy into it. One of my, great, personal friends, who lives here on the mainland, he does that for a baseball team, and like, he just loves it. Like, he loves trying to do the roster management for baseball. And, he doesn't, he knows the head coach, but he's really tight with the recruiting coordinator. He's a former student athlete. He just geeks out about it and loves being around the game, and he has the financials to do it. Like, it doesn't matter about the ROI, but I'd say the Ivy Leaguers probably understand that a little bit more. But, there's one other curveball. I haven't talked about this in an article. It probably will be in some point, but in this past head coaching cycle, there was a head coach in college basketball that was basically hired to, it got the job, was not the most qualified and probably not even in the top 5 or maybe even top 10 for this coaching pool, but got the job because, they are tied from their family to a lot of money that promised that they would fund the NIL program or the revenue share program and then some for the department. That's now creeping into this already dirty business. So again, to your point, like, you're going to see some really random schools pop up. And also you're going to see people get fired quickly because you're like, these guys are decision makers that are funding it. And they're like, coach funded you this, like, and you didn't develop them and we won 12 games. Like, you're done. So again, there's two sides to every story. There's pros and cons to every aspect, but that's where we are in an industry. It's a broken system. And when I say break the rules, what's going to happen? A slap on the wrist.
Seems like that slap always comes for Oklahoma State harder than anyone else, but I do agree. It just seems like that's part of it at this point for Oklahoma State fans who just, in the whole SI scandal that happened that had no validity behind it whatsoever and was written by an OU guy, it just seems crazy. But then again, you've got Lamont Evans deal, it just seems bizarre. Brad Underwood didn't take him on his staff for whatever reason to Illinois. Did he know better? Did he not? Who knows? So there's just a bunch of questions we have as Oklahoma State fans. But as we wrap up this episode here, anything else you want to touch on with the NIL and kind of the new House ruling with the $20 million it's able to use by athletic departments?
Yeah, I think one thing I would add to this, Cal, and once again, thanks for having me, and thanks for listening. If you want to continue the conversation, hit me up on Twitter X or shoot me an email, and hopefully you didn't fall asleep to it. And if you did, I hope you're having great dreams about Oklahoma State winning championships. There
we go.
And then maybe those dreams become a reality. So, no, the one other thing I would touch on is I think we as an industry get to a point where it doesn't, and this sounds super backwards, but hear me out here, Cal. We get to a point where there's more of a soft cap and a hard cap, kind of like the NBA with their, tax apron, their first cap and the second cap, soft, hard cap. Because, and you're seeing it right now, people are asking, why are you limiting me? Why is this third party telling me why I can or can't give my, sixth man or woman $50,000 in return for promotions? Why are you saying that I can't pay, a backup quarterback this amount? Because you don't know that my starting quarterback has a secret wrist injury and I'm really worried about them. So why are you putting a cap on what I can pay them? And it's opening up, and it will guarantee it. There will be a high profile case in the next year, most likely sooner, of somebody, pun not intended, by the way, with sooner, of somebody saying, why are you limiting how much we can pay? I think you get to a point that it needs to be more of a, instead of like a hard cap, or even maybe not a floor, so to speak. What am I trying to say here? We need to have a more like a professional model approach where it is a little bit more exuberant than what it really should be, where, there is more flexibility and there isn't necessarily a third party that doesn't really understand what is going on and arbitrarily saying, no, this isn't the right amount for X, Y, and Z. The salary floor is probably more appropriate to me. Something that some other professional leagues need to do, cough, cough, baseball. But, and maybe that salary floor becomes that break off point to become a Division I school, because it's not fair to some of these student athletes that are excited to get quote unquote go D1 and they, are still getting McDonald's for every meal, if that, and they're on buses that break down, every other trip. There are horror stories for some of these D1 schools in name only. So I think we get to a point where that there's a salary floor and more of a soft and hard cap of monies being handed out.
Yeah, I'm also really curious here how this will go for basketball athletes specifically going forward, where, especially in the women's circle, but definitely in the men's circle too, of guys going, I'd make more money if I just stayed here one more year in college.
Right.
And guys who are number 1 overall draft pick next year. I mean, AJ DeBonce, there's rumors he's getting paid $4 to $5 million, just NIL deal, one NIL deal. So if he's getting paid, for example, 15 to 20, and the Utah Jazz don't end up having the number 1 overall pick, he's playing in BYU next year, etc., then he just goes, hey, I'm going to BYU. I'm going to stay in the state of Utah, get drafted by the Jazz, or I'm not in the draft. Period.
Yeah.
That's it. And when does that all kind of coagulate, and when do we see all of that form together and create a real issue, right? I mean, we've had guys, Eli Manning, hold out and say, no, the Chargers aren't drafting me. I'm just not going there. And the Chargers end up figuring out a way where they get Phillip Rivers, another draft pick. But that's not every day. I think if Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders had a little bit better of a draft profile coming in, if Shedeur had really commanded the room and been a number 1 overall kind of guy, then we might be seeing something completely different. It might not be hey, the Browns even had a chance to draft him, no matter which spot they could have drafted him at, by the way.
Yeah. Well, you're seeing it already in early draft entrants in the NBA. AJ just signed something with Fanatics today that I think was 7. I want to say it was 8 figures. I mean, that's stupid money. I mean, the guy hasn't even played a dribble of collegiate basketball yet, and that money's there. But obviously, going back to what I said, I can't judge that. But to a company, they see the return on the investment. So I can't sit here and say that's stupid money, because obviously they see it as an ROI on something. That I think is more pressure on the professional leagues, especially on the NFL. They have a very strict CBA when it comes to rookie salary caps for good reasons, but that needs to evolve because the collegiate game has evolved. And I think you are spot on, Cal, that there's going to be some high profile athletes that go, you know what, I'm just going to come back to college and I'll make guaranteed money no matter what. Or, not saying Cam Rising was ever this NFL draft pick, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to make some money and stay in college, have my car, have my housing paid for. And I think it's a good model-ish to an extent to help keep kids in school and also develop them a little bit more, maybe even mature before they get to that next level. But I think the professional leagues need to adjust. And if you want to put on that tinfoil cap, you also nailed it. Ryan Smith, BYU, Utah Jazz, money. Let's bookmark this. Only if and when the Utah Jazz get the number 1 pick next year.
Yeah, because if they don't, I feel like there'll be a little bit of just questions surrounding that BYU program. Because I mean, this guy pours so much money into the BYU program, and it just seems bizarre. Just seems bizarre. Then at the end of the day, how it all came together real well. I mean, there's not, for example, the Oklahoma State donors are not going, Kay Cunningham goes to Oklahoma State Thunder or else. And that's the year the Thunder had, a 6th overall draft pick. And that was the same year they drafted Josh Giddey, same year they could have drafted Kate, theoretically, if they've got the number 1 pick, which is their own. So just so many different weird things. But Casey, thanks so much for joining here on the latest episode of CGA Tour. Where can everyone find you here for more info?
KC Smurthwaite, K as in king. I am not a king. C as in Charlie. That's not my name. And then just start typing SMUR and it should come up.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for joining here on the latest episode of the CGA Tour. If you're not already, please follow the CGA Tour on all social media platforms, but definitely subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you're listening to podcasts. And we will catch you guys again soon.